Welcome to the Ad Nauseam Podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 161 of the Ad Nauseam Podcast. I'm down here in the bunker. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm down here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Dr. David Noe. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing okay, but Jeff, you don't sound like you're doing too well. What's going on?
What is it? Did my tone give that away?
There were somber overtones.
Really?
Yes.
Well, it was unintended. I'm feeling just fine.
There was not like a warm blue kind of feeling. It was more like an Arctic silver.
Really?
Yes.
Really? Well, all that was unintended.
Okay.
My entire family is sick right now.
Oh, no.
And so I'm the one.
Of you?
Probably.
Okay.
But I'm the one who's escaped the illness so far. So maybe it's just that sort of Damocles that I feel dangling above me. Maybe that's kind of coming out. I don't know.
The sword of Robitussin hanging over your head?
Yes, exactly.
Remind me not to shake your hand today.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So what kind of, is it the flu kind of symptoms?
Yeah, kind of a flu, stomach, head thing.
That's really terrible.
It's miserable, but it's going around, as they say.
I guess. I suppose I'm vulnerable to that.
Yeah.
So you asked how I'm doing. I'm doing well.
Good.
We have maybe turned the page in terms of the seasons.
Yes.
This endless summer may be coming to an end.
Right.
And we're now past the autumnal equinox, so we're going to get some fall, some pumpkin spice. Have you opened a vein of pumpkin spice in your front yard or anything?
No, not yet. It's been too summery.
Yes.
But now we finally get some of this cool, little bit of rainy weather.
Right.
It's starting to feel more like autumn.
Class is going well for you?
Been a very good start.
Filling young minds with lots of wisdom of the ages and so forth?
Classical goodness. I'm teaching a brand new course this semester on Greco-Roman archeology, which has been a lot of fun.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Got a lot of students in there who are gung-ho.
Great.
So they're very much into it. Yeah.
That's right. Good. Well, I hope they dig in. So what are we talking about today?
We have an interview today. All
right.
With, I got to get the name right. It's Diane Arnson Svarlien.
Arnson Svarlien. That's right.
Who is a classicist, a translator, and we're talking to her today about her recent publication, or is it out yet? Is it coming out?
It's coming out pretty much as we speak. Hackett is releasing it. It's 3 plays in 1 volume.
Yep.
The Lysistrata of Aristophanes.
And the women at the Thesmophoria, which is just called Thesmo.
The Thesmophoria Zeusi is the old-fashioned name. And then one that you love with the Brekekekeks Coax.
Yes, my favorite Aristophanes play, Frogs.
The Frogs, with that great throwdown between Aeschylus and Euripides down in the underworld.
Yeah.
So she's going to join us in just a moment and talk about some of these wonderful texts. We have a bit of a corrigendum to get through first, Jeff.
No. Again?
Yes.
What happened this time?
Well, you remember last week when Mr. Will Fitzgerald corrected us about how there are, in fact, many hot springs in the United States.
Yes.
He said there's Palm Springs, there's
Hot Springs.
Yes. There's even here in our home state, there's the Kellogg and Post people down at Battle Creek.
Right.
And then we ventured to guess that maybe Saratoga Springs.
Yes.
Remember?
Yeah.
We guessed that maybe they were in Florida.
Yeah, they're not.
I think that was my guess. You know where they are?
No idea.
They're in New York.
Oh, okay.
So Will felt compelled. He's going for the Tom.
Oh, did he contact you?
He did. He's going for the Tom Flynn distinction. Remember our Australian correspondent?
Oh, man, exactly.
He's trying to live rent-free in my head now. Will is.
Breathing down our neck.
Contacted me and said, actually, Saratoga Springs is in the state of New York.
Okay.
And I said, what? Come on. So I looked it up, and he's right.
He's right.
Yes, there's a horse racing there and bathing in the hot springs and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's good to know.
Yeah.
We're in the education business, so it's fine to have the tables turned on us. And
keeps us humble.
For us to be learned something.
Right. So, hey, I think we should dive right into this interview.
All right. So without further ado, let's talk to Diane. Welcome, Diane, to the show. We're so glad that you could join us today. And
Thank you.
Can you tell us first, where are you located right now? Are you in the Massachusetts area?
No, that's the other Lexington. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
In the heart of the bluegrass.
Great. That would explain the high temperatures you're experiencing presently. Is that right?
Yeah, today is very rainy, but we've had a summer is just going on and on.
Okay.
And it's still been like high 80s. And
Right.
we've got tomatoes in the garden. They're still
Wonderful.
producing really well. So I'm in no hurry for frost.
Yes. Now, this is not the first time that you've been on the podcast. You were with us a long time ago when you read for us some Greek of a short excerpt of something you were working on. And I think we arranged to have one of our multiple apprentices send you a gift certificate for a bottle of wine. Do you remember that?
Oh, that's right. I'd forgotten about. Yes,
Yeah.
it was real. Like you figured out my closest wine store, which
Right.
is like right in my neighborhood. That was really smart. Yeah, that
Well, I
store
just
is still
wanted to-
there. By
Oh,
the way.
good.
So, yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, how did it taste? Was it good? Was it worth the
Well,
effort?
Now I'm trying to remember. I'm sure I love the wine. So,
Sure.
yeah, and the experience was fun. I think weren't we talking about Alcestis?
Yeah,
That's correct.
that's right.
Was,
Yes.
yeah, so
for-
that was good.
we were very grateful for that. I was telling Jeff right before you came on the show that you and I have a very short history. Do you remember this, or am I just another empty face?
Well, no, I remember we met at Latin camp.
That's correct.
Also known as the Conventiculum Latinum.
That's
in
right, the
Lexington.
Lexingtoniense. So
Yeah,
the years
so
I was
that's-
there were 2005 and 2009. I think you may have been there both times.
I was there. I proudly held the record of having been to every single conventiculum
Oh,
since the first one. And every year I would really lord that over people. But then when it went to Zoom, my record was broken.
Yes.
So it's, I'm not, I wish there were. I think there are in-person conventicula still at Dickinson College with Terentius Thunberg, and of course there are all kinds of other active
Sure.
Latin things that go on. But yeah, the in-person conventicula in Lexington haven't happened since before COVID.
right.
Hmm.
So when you and I were there in 2009, I believe you and I and David Morgan of blessed memory and a few other individuals went to a Subway or something like that. It was a very nice, the sandwich restaurant. It was a very nice memory that I have.
Oh yeah, that's
So
that's good.
you
Yes.
you were very charming and friendly. I appreciate that very much. So
Well,
Jeff, we
thank
have a number of questions to ask Diane today. So you want to get it started?
Well, one question, Dan, that we like to ask of all our guests who are kind of in your line and our line is what was your path to the classics? What brought you to kind of where you are now?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's and actually I can kind of attribute it to one person who also of blessed memory. His name's Eric Hansen. He was a friend of my parents, and I was in high school. I'm getting ready to go to college, and I went to the University of Virginia, and I'm trying to think about what I'm going to study. And of course, I already knew that I was going to be an English major, but then when I got there, I ended up being a double major in English and classics. But I really liked language, and I took French all the way from junior high through high school. So I said, well, I want to take another language. So I wonder what I should take. And my parents' friend said, well, duh, ancient Greek. And I thought, oh yeah, that's a good idea. That was, and I had, so to spread the credit around a little bit, I had AP English class in high school, and we read maybe I forget if the whole Oresteia or maybe just Agamemnon in translation. Of course, everything in translation. We read Sophocles and no Euripides, because at that time, Euripides was sort of the less considered the less great book-ish of the three tragedians in American pedagogy, I think. But we read Aeschylus and Sophocles, and I thought, oh yeah, those I like Greek drama. So I started taking ancient Greek in my first year of college, and it was very hard. I found I had to spend a lot of time learning it, so it really drew my attention in, and then I loved it. So after a few years of taking Greek, one of my classmates, who the famous Daniel Mendelsohn said, well, why don't you declare a classics major? You're taking all this Greek. And again, I said, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So I did. And so then when at the end of college, I had a double major in English and classics, and I felt like classics was, I knew I wanted to go to grad school because I loved being a student and a scholar, and didn't see any other sort of thing I would want to do or be. And I thought, well, with Greek and even more so with Latin, I'm kind of just getting going. Like I still really need to read a lot more to really learn these languages. I didn't start Latin until my junior year of college, so I was even more of a beginner with that.
Was it an option? Was Latin an option in your high school or no?
I think it was, but like I think they had a really small class. Like one day I walked into the library and there were like 5 people and they said, oh yeah, this is the Latin class. And I said, oh yeah, I didn't know there was a Latin class. So, yeah. But it wasn't, because I think that's what my parents wanted me to start at junior high, but they didn't have it then. And so, yeah, it wasn't on my radar screen. If there wasn't a real Latin program at my high school.
So then where did you head off to grad school? And I don't know if you can summarize that experience in a short frame.
Oh,
I'm sure.
Well, I actually loved grad school. I mean, grad school is supposed to be, I think, like you're supposed to hate it because it's so hard, but I loved it. I went to University of Texas at Austin, and part of loving it was living in Austin was so wonderful. But it was a very big department, and so there's this really big group of fellow students who are all interested in Greek and Latin, and so it seemed great. And it was, let's see, what was the question to summarize?
Yeah, just you went to grad school at Austin.
Yeah, and there was another thing I really loved. There was a professor there, Gareth Morgan, who every day in his office, we would read Homer out loud. He would and if you do that, you just go there for half an hour a day, 5 days a week, read out loud. You can easily finish the Iliad or the Odyssey in less than a semester. And then we would read some other stuff too. But that's how I really got the feel of dactylic hexameter.
Right.
And it was great just to, instead of, I love approaching languages and literature in a scholarly way, but I also love just experiencing it. And that's what, when you read aloud, that's what you're doing. You're just experiencing the language and the poetry. And then very influential in my becoming a translator was Douglas Parker, who was famous for translations of Aristophanes. And he taught a course called verse translation or literary translation, something like that. It was a workshop, and we didn't go on and on about translation theory. It was just like here, every week we'd have an assignment. Like here's actually one of our assignments was the frog chorus from The Frog. So I had, I had an early draft of that that I could go back to when I translated frogs. Or here's a poem by Catullus, or here's, it was almost always poetry. And we'd all go home and write our translations. Then we'd come back poetry workshop style and read what we had written, and people would sort of critique them and talk about each other's versions. And so that's what really, and I just loved it so much. I think that sort of inspired me to keep doing translations after that. Before that, I was, go on. Sorry.
I was going to say, did you even at that early stage, did you begin to develop your own theory of translation? And just in simple terms, this is what I take to be a good translation. This is the sort of thing I would like to do. And then these are some of the pitfalls or unpleasant things I'd like to avoid. Or were you not really thinking in those terms at that early stage?
Well, I was never really thinking, and still don't, that much of kind of a manifesto of what is good or not good in translation, because everything is totally ad hoc. I do have a sort of my watchword of translation is fidelity. It's I want to be faithful, and I want the thing I write to be the same as the original, but whatever that means. Like if it's a verse drama, like Euripides or Aristophanes, I want it to be in formal verse the way the original is, and to have music and songs, and to be, kind of written for the stage, because that's where it's wonderful to read these plays, but it's even more wonderful to experience them as theater. So you have to think about, for example, your book can have footnotes to explain who this guy is, or what this allusion is, but there are no footnotes in the theater, so it has to be, you have to translate it into language that will work on the stage. And if in the case of Aristophanes, if it's supposed to be, like, you can translate a joke and then have a footnote explaining why it's supposed to be funny, but the real challenge is you have to have something that will make people laugh.
Yes. What's better than explaining a joke, right? Everybody loves it when a joke is explained. Early on, you didn't come up so much with a theory of translation, but you always wanted fidelity to what the original says to be well reflected in your own translation. And then Jeff was asking about, some of the jokes that were more difficult than others. But how did you deal with meter? Because I know a lot of this is covered in the translator's preface, but for the sake of our audience who haven't read it yet, this is kind of like an anticipation for them. They can get, the translator's own perspective before they then go read the book.
Well, yeah, meter is, to me, that's one of the really important things to be faithful to. And just to go back to what you were saying, I never developed a theory of translation that I would want to publish as a treatise, but I've always loved the practice of translation. Because with poetry, any one line of poetry, or if it's metrical, let's, say, a few lines in a row. There's so much going on in it. And there are the basic ideas which you could translate into prose, but then you have to translate it in, like, why is Euripides great, or why is Aristophanes great? It's all in the language. So you want to make your language have the same vivacity that the original has. And meter is a big part of that. And I think that with Aristophanes, everyone knows that he's comedy, but it's less fully realized, I think, among people who read translations, that it's poetry, that every single line is metrical verse. So, and with Aristophanes was kind of a new realm for me to enter, because of course Euripides is also, and what I translated before was mostly Euripides plus some individual poems of different poets. But tragedy and comedy, they're both 100% metrical verse interspersed with songs. And you've got the speech, which is in iambic trimeter, which is ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. And then you have anapasts, da-da-da, 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 and Euripides has these, and Euripides even has trochaic tetrameter. But Aristophanes goes beyond that, and he has all kinds of, especially these different tetrameter passages. So there'll be long chunks of people talking to each other, but they're speaking in these really artificial tetrameter meters, like anapestic tetrameter. Let's see. So, and that's what that's what kind of makes the language fun. So I decided with in Euripides, I always had, okay, the Greek iambic trimeter I will render as English iambic pentameter, because that's kind of a no-brainer. It's iambic pentameter is sort of the bread and butter meter of English verse. Everyone, it's Shakespeare. Everyone can read it and say, oh yeah, that's poetry. But it's also not that far from the way people actually talk. Like I could say, hi, David, nice, da 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 da. Hi, David, nice to see you. How's it going? That just sounds like a natural.
Maybe you look much handsomer than you did in 2009 would be another way to finish that. But I'd want you to tell the truth. That's the only thing.
It's a little long. Let's see. Hi, David. You are looking very handsome. That's like a perfect iambic pentameter, and yet it's like a thing that you would say in real life, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
I get it all. I get it all the time.
But anapestic tetrameter, so you don't even, and you think it's poetry to your ears, but it really, literally is poetry. But nobody, like, people don't naturally just pop out with an anapestic tetrameter.
Right.
Maybe it happens, but it's rare.
It is rare.
There's also, Aristophanes has trochaic tetrameter, anapestic tetrameter, iambic tetrameter, and people just go on and on for long stretches in these meters. So that was, and Euripides, when he does use trochaic tetrameter, which is really interesting, especially later in his career, he always threw a little bit of trochaic tetrameter in, but not too much, So I was used to that. I said, okay, I'm going to be faithful to this meter. Like there's a little bit at the end of Helen. There's a little bit in Trojan Women. And
both Euripides plays, just so our audience.
Yeah, and Euripides. Yeah. And also just to shout out another interesting thing in Euripides, in the play Andromache, there's even a little stretch of elegiac couplets, which it's the only place in drama, Athenian drama, where you have elegiac couplets, which
I didn't know that.
You think of elegiac couplets are their own thing, but not a dramatic meter. But there they are in Andromache, interestingly. And dactylic hexameter, that's also sprinkled through Euripides. Like there's in Trojan Women, there's a bunch of it pops up because, and you think, well, this is a very epic play. It's so Iliadic, so it kind of makes sense to have some dactylic hexameter. And then in Aristophanes, you get it mostly as a parody, like when or to be funny. And there's a scene in Lysistrata where Lysistrata reads an oracle to the women, and it's in dactylic hexameter because that's the normal meter for oracles. And this was we did a play reading of Lysistrata at the SCS meeting, the Society for Classical Studies.
Was that in Chicago?
Yeah, in Chicago last year, and the cast was just very brilliant. But there, and we had, of course, as appropriate, all the songs were musical, and we had different songwriters writing melodies. But
I was going to suggest we look at page 11 of the text. I wanted to ask you about a particular phrase. This is in the Lysistrata, and
page 11.
If the audience wants to know whether it should be pronounced Lysistrata or Lysistrata, they're going to have to read the translator's preface. And until that time, they probably won't be able to sleep at night. But if you look on, I think it's line 7. Let's see. No, it's going to be line 9, where a Kalonike. Is that how you would pronounce her name? Kalonike?
Well, metrically, it has to be Kalonike or Kalonike.
I see.
How can I Kalonike? My heart's on fire. Yeah.
I love this. Kalonike. I love this phrase. Calm down. Relax your eyebrows. How did you arrive at that particular expression, and what does it mean? Relax your eyebrows.
That was I think in the Greek, it's something like skuthropon, or it's like you're making a scowly expression. So yeah, literally it's not, see, this will be easy to find because it's near the beginning of the play.
Right. Yeah.
Literally it's not relax your eyebrows, but it's like, stop, don't have such a scowly expression.
Give those eyebrows a break.
Yeah. Anyway, something like that. But yeah, so that's an example of, thank you for, I'm glad you like that. I was just trying to convey the idea of, don't be all brow furrowed or whatever it is. Yeah.
And of course, because you're a great student of this as well as practitioner, many of the older translations that you can find in the Loeb and other respectable editions, they go for those compound adjectives, of which Greek is so fond, right? Don't go all brow furrowed. That would be a typical way to express some notion like that. But I think you're going for and achieving a much more idiomatic and colloquial kind of rendering. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think in a dialogue scene like that, people are just talking like normal people.
Right.
And then, but speaking of compounds, with Aristophanes, like for him, it's a whole art of just the longest, wildest compounds he can think of in a poetic context. So you want to be true to, one of the things you want to be faithful to is the tone and the register. Like, is this just two people talking, or is this some extravagant poetic thing? Like, also I found the oracle. Okay. And also I never quite finished answering your question about meter. So dactylic hexameter in Aristophanes, one place he uses it is the oracle in Lysistrata. And also in the frogs, you have Aeschylus and Euripides making fun of each other and doing parodies of each other's style. And they both use dactylic hexameters as part of their songs to make fun of each other, because in real life, they, both poets did that. So I think I answered the question about meter, that it's just, when I got to Aristophanes, I said, okay, this is important to be faithful to these tetrameters. Okay, so here's an example of wild compounds.
Is this from the frogs?
This is from frogs, yeah. And so it's just the contest between Euripides and Aeschylus has just started. So they're both dead. Aeschylus died like 50 years ago. Euripides died really recently when this play is put on stage. So they get to the underworld, and it turns out that they're competing with each other for the throne of tragedy. Right. And then it turns out not only that, but Pluto tells Dionysus, whichever poet you say wins the contest, you can actually take back to Athens with you. So, but Euripides here's his attack on Aeschylus. He says, I figured him out long ago. The man creates monstrosities. His tongue is willful. His mouth is like a banging gate, unbridled, unskilled in badinage, bombasticated. So, and this is, and then Aeschylus replies, is that so? Do you dare to take me on, you farmer's market foundling? You won't fare well. Palaver, gatherer, creator of beggars, stitcher of patches, and in the Greek these are compound words that. And then the thing, his mouth is like a banging gate. See, you can tell I kind of wanted to use this as an example. Is in frogs, it's Aristophanes has a thuroton stoma, like an ungated mouth. But he's it's an echo of Euripides, because in Euripides Orestes, someone is described as athuroglosos, ungated tongued. And so Euripides' compound there is sort of worthy of Aristophanes. In fact,
Yeah.
the Euripidean language there is even more like, here's a crazy creative compound word that he's out Aristophanes Aristophanes. So, go on. Sorry.
I was going to say, before we go back to the Lysistrata, because I wanted to ask you something on the Lysistrata. How did you construe Lekuthiana Polisen, the famous lost his little bottle of oil, which is the Euripidean? It's how Aeschylus is making fun of Euripides.
Yeah.
Could you set the stage for us a little bit, and then tell us how you took that very famous little tag?
Yes, this leads right into. Oh, and then you know what I found the oracle in Lysistrata, and then I dropped the book, or I looked somewhere else in the book and I lost my place. That's okay. People can find it themselves. Okay. Sure. So the contest has started, and first they sort of they hurl insults at each other, and then there are all these stages of the contest, and they're all kind of silly and funny. Aeschylus says, okay, I can show you how dumb Euripides' verse is, because this is after Euripides has been critiquing Aeschylus's prologues and sort of taking them apart for, logical inconsistencies and stuff, and redundant language, and
using some Socratic elenchus on him, in other words, right?
Yeah. So like here's Euripides. Just listen. I've come back, he says, and re-inhabited this land. Come back and re-inhabit both mean the same thing. So, but then even though Euripides himself is famous for this kind of, he uses plenty of that kind of pleonastic language himself. So that's part of the funny. So then Aeschylus says, okay, here we go. Look, I don't have to pick at every word. By Zeus, I can rip your prologues into shreds with no more than a little oil flask. So this is the stage one of the contest. They're critiquing each other's prologues. So Aeschylus is saying Euripides' language is so predictable and his versification is so predictable. So they're talking about this just very geeky technical aspect of versification that Lekuthiana Polisen, the phrase lost his little oil flask, can be plugged into all these different Euripidean lines. So one thing is that it's predictable that oh yeah, he's always going to have a caesura right there. And the other one is that Lekuthion, the word Lekuthion that means a little oil flask that you would carry with you when you go to the gym, to sort of oil your body after you work out or something. It has a resolution in it. It has two short syllables instead of a long syllable, which is a poetic license that, in fact, the way the plays of Euripides are dated is, as Euripides went on in his career, he used more and more resolutions in his meter, putting
more syllables.
Yeah, like a little
adding
more
syllables.
Extra syllables. So you can do
poetic
this in
inflation.
English. Like in iambic pentameter, if you have a perfect iambic pentameter, ba-bum, 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 it's 10 syllables, right?
Right.
But you can throw in, just so your pentameter doesn't become too repetitive, you can throw in little extra unstressed syllables. Like you could say, ba-ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum, And so this is the equivalent of what Euripides does. But part of the metrical joke might be a resolution, how Euripidean, and part of it is just the repetitiveness. Also, all of the prologues he quotes are character's name, participle, something, they're sort of syntactically repetitive. So
highly formulaic, you might say.
Yeah, so that's what Aeschylus is saying. He's saying Euripides' prologues are so formulaic that you can just plug in the phrase lost his little, or the way I translated it was his oil flask gone, because I needed it to fit into, this is an iambic dialogue part. So I needed it to fit the end of an iambic pentameter line instead of Greek iambic trimeter. Da-da, da-da, his oil flask, gone. And sometimes just to vary it a little bit, like here's one, his oil flask, ? Gone, so, but you have the repetition. And then Euripides comes back at Aeschylus with like quoting his verses and like inserting nonsense phrases between them, or one of his songs where after each phrase, he inserts the musical Phlattothrattophlattothrat, that's his parody of Aeschylus's music. So anyway, did that.
Yes, that's very good. And
I love it. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, speaking of parodying Aeschylus's music, it's time for the ads.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Dave, I love my Ratio 8.
Yes, I know you do.
Right? Every morning I hit that button. You got your 3 stages. You got the bloom, you got the brew, and then it's ready.
I think there's a tree in your yard, like an oak or a maple.
Yeah.
And you shuffled out there one day with your little pen knife.
Yes.
And you carved a little heart, Jeff plus Ratio forever.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disturbed the neighbors.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay. Right?
It's none of their business if you love coffee.
Right.
Have you ever invited them over for a cup?
No, I'm
cuppa?
I'm very jealous about my coffee. Right.
Maybe they're just not up to the Ratio experience.
I suppose, right. But I've always, even before the Ratio, I've loved the morning ritual of having the cup of coffee in a quiet house to myself, and this just elevates the experience.
It does,
right?
yes. It's an elevating experience.
Yep.
And I love my Ratio. I got the Ratio 8 with the oyster shell color that complements my cabinets, and then the walnut accents. You went with the stainless steel.
I did, yeah.
You wanted the more industrial Death Star sort of look.
Exactly. That kind of the steampunk,
right?
As maybe my kids would say.
Okay,
that's kind of the aesthetic I'm going for.
So did you brew some up this morning?
Of course.
Okay.
Right.
The hot water came down through the metallic veins at about 200 degrees.
Yes.
Were there stages?
There was, you got the bloom where you have that essential off-gassing.
Right.
Then you have the brew.
Yes.
Where you got the water coming down.
Like the Hitchcock movie, Bloom with a Brew.
Exactly right.
Right.
And then it's ready.
Huh.
Yeah.
So for these 3 different stages, there must be multiple buttons, maybe a dial, a lever, some pumping or any things like that you have to do?
You would think, as good as the coffee is, you think that this has to be very complex, but it isn't. It's a one touch, and it goes through the sequences, and you are good to go.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Now, you do you go into the hand-blown borosilicate glass carafe, or do you go directly into the hulking flagon?
Directly into the hulking flagon,
okay.
And I put the stopper on top, and it stays hot for hours.
Yeah, like the rubber bung there that just perches on top, and then you're good.
Yep, all set to go.
So let's say that the audience, they're thinking, these guys just go on and on about coffee. I got to give this a try.
Yep.
If that's their mindset, what ought they do?
They should go to ratiocoffee.com. Look at one of these sleek machines. You got the 8, and then the younger brother, the 6, which is a similar machine, but for a lesser price. And then coming soon, we have the Ratio 4.
That's right. This is going to revolutionize the world of home coffee making. It's got the same mechanics, the same engineering, the same guts as the 6 and the 8, but a smaller form factor.
Yep.
Fit nicely on your countertop, take up less real estate, and also a more affordable price point.
That's right. So we're really excited to bring this out.
Yep.
We're planning on having a giveaway.
We're going to give one away. That's right.
So check it out. Ratiocoffee.com. Get the 6 or the 8 or hang in there for the 4.
Right.
And Dave, what's our coupon code?
Well, the coupon code for the month of September is ANCOH5.
Okay. And that H stands for?
Hooray.
Hooray.
Last week it was huzzah.
Huzzah. That's right.
Maybe we need something else than hooray. It seems a little trite.
Yeah, I guess so.
Help us, maybe. ANCOH5. Check it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the good folks at Hackett Publishing. And let's be honest, Jeff, without Hackett Publishing, this podcast would probably not even exist.
It's true.
I mean, we got started without them, but they've been really carrying us for a long time now.
It's true.
Fall of 2020, they took a chance on a knucklehead, actually a couple of knuckleheads now that I think about it. And they said, yeah, we want to be in the business of supporting the classics and bringing them to a mass audience.
Yep.
And since that time, their sponsorship has been incredible, including today's episode, Jeff.
That's right.
We have Diane talking to us about Aristophanes, a tremendous catalog that this company has with offices in Indianapolis, Indiana, and
And Cambridge, Massachusetts.
That's right. And can you give us just a few words that are non-Aristophanic about Hackett?
I love Hackett. I have a number of their tomes on my own personal bookshelf. I love their books that I use for my classes.
Right.
They're often a go-to because you're going to get great translations and you're going to get a good price point. Clever art. Even Diane's book that's coming out has got great art on the front.
Some chorus girls or something.
Yes, exactly. In the midst of war.
Okay.
Right. So it's a nod towards the Lysistrata. And it's just great. It's clever, and they are one of these rare companies that is serious about keeping the flame of the classics alive and getting it to a mass audience in an affordable, accessible way.
I know that many of the students where you teach at the community college, they're not rolling in dough.
Nope.
They like the material. They like the classes, like your archaeology course. But who has $400 to shell out on a single class?
Right.
For the 9th edition, which is no different than the 8th, except they just changed the cover or something.
Exactly.
But not Hackett's books.
Nope.
These are $10 to $20, and they're inexpensive, but they're not cheap. They're well made.
They're well made. Yeah. So, listeners, do yourself a favor. Go to hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com. Check out their wide selection. They have a lot of classics, but they got a lot of other stuff there as well. Scroll through their tremendous catalog. Find the ones you want. Drop it in your satchel. And if you use this coupon code, AN2024, Dave, that will get them 2 great things.
They're going to get 20% off. 20%?
Yep.
And free shipping.
That's great.
And if you stay tuned to the end of the episode, we're going to give away a few of Diane's new copies of the Aristophanes plays, and you have to check out our social media handles in order to get in the drawing to get one of these free volumes.
Fantastic. Yeah, so Diane, as we get back into it, one of the things I love about that section of the frogs is that it really works for a modern audience. And when his oil flask gone, I love the incongruity of when Aeschylus plugs that into whatever Euripides is saying. It still works as comedy and doesn't need a lot of footnotes. And the same thing with the Phlattothrattophlattothrat stuff. It's great.
Yeah, Phlattothrattophlattothrat. It's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Exactly. And I thought too, going back to relax your eyebrows too. It's a funny phrase.
Yeah, and
it sets the tone for that. It's at the beginning of Frogs when Xanthias says to Dionysus, should I tell one of the usual gags, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. He's kind of aware that he's in a comedy, and I love that kind of stuff. Oh, what I wanted to ask you, Diane, is have you been involved?
Let me just say one more thing about the oil flask. It's one example of where you really kind of have to have a verse translation, because if you translate the oil flask thing into prose, it just doesn't really make sense, that it's rhythmic predictability, So now is this still the podcast, or are we just like chatting?
Oh, this is still
this is the podcast.
So this is the real thing. We're not okay. Good.
Yeah,
well, good thing I didn't say what I was going to say. Okay.
I'm not sure what you mean, but it is a family show, so we may have to edit a couple things, but.
I didn't even ask about that. Like
that's okay.
It's difficult to talk about Aristophanes without
because you have scatology,
of course.
You've got misogyny. You've got any number of things. Speaking of misogyny, I wanted to ask you, page 12. This is back in the Lysistrata. Okay. This is kind of a general question.
Your pronunciation of Lysistrata.
You're welcome. I aim to please. It's Kalanike again. She's speaking, and she says, "Listen, sweetie. They'll be here. It's just, you know what it's like to try to get a woman out the door. They've got important things to do. Their husbands are waking up the maid or rocking the baby or giving him a bath or a little snack. So I'm wondering, a lot of Aristophanes' humor is, a kind of battle of the sexes, right? It's making fun of men and women, but maybe women more than men. How did you deal with all of this in terms of following?
How can I even translate this misogyny?
Along the lines of being faithful to the text, but also getting the jokes in and, being responsible with them. It's a general question.
Yeah, that's and also just the thing you just quoted. They've got important things to do. Their husbands, that's supposed to be a joke.
That's an innuendo. Yeah, for sure.
But it depends on the actor's delivery. See,
Correct.
live theater is so important. But yeah, there are things. I mean, not just misogyny, but there are things that are offensive in these plays, and especially I think the play I'm the most uncomfortable with is Women at the Thesmophoria, when there's like just very intense making fun of an enslaved foreigner, and and the brilliant resolution of the plot is by giving him a prostitute, and it's just it's
morally problematic, you could say.
Yeah,
I don't
think
know.
so.
That's the
But
term.
but as for misogyny, it's almost the whole premise of Thesmo, as I'll call it, is that women hate Euripides because he's so misogynistic, because he has characters like, and this comes up in Frogs too, like Stenobia and Phaedra, who are evil women. But in fact, it's kind of a joke, because Euripides' plays are usually his portrayals of women are very sensitive. And in Lysistrata too, I think Lysistrata, is one of the few Aristophanic characters who are, main characters who isn't kind of a jerk. I mean, she's just she's just admirable in every way, unlike in the other two plays in this book. Dionysus is he's kind of a goofball, and in-law in Thesmo, he's a very crass person. But I think the women really kind of come across better than the men do in Lysistrata, because they create this really ingenious plot, this scheme to end the war, and they're successful in this complex thing, and they I think the men kind of come across worse than the women. But yeah, you do have gender stereotyping, and the opening scene that we're talking about in Lysistrata is part of it. It's like, what it's like trying to get the women out the door, or or even Lysistrata says right at the beginning, like, oh, men think that women are just, they think we're terrible, and Kalonike says, yeah, we are terrible. and then in Thesmo, there are all these speeches by the women saying, like, oh, these are all the things that we do, like, that are so important to us, like faking pregnancy and sneaking out to have sex with our boyfriends, So yeah, that. But it's a comedy.
It raises questions about questions that we don't have a lot of answers for, like who was the original audience, right, and who was in the theaters to hear this.
Oh yeah, that's a scholarly debate, and there's. There are lots of people on both sides of that. Were women in the theater or not? I think I'm on team, yes, there were women in the theater. So, but one point that's been made is and part of the evidence for that is from Lysistrata. They say, like, anyone among you, man or woman. And also think about, the premise of Thesmo, that the women of Athens are so mad at Euripides. Well, it's a fiction and a play, but how are the women supposed to even know what's in Euripides if they're not in the theater?
Right.
But I forget who used this expression. The notional audience is male. That just as for in a patriarchal society, the notional audience of everything is male, so, but yeah, that it is a point of debate whether women were actually in the theater or not. But I don't know. I think they, also the plays were, it was a religious festival, and that's where women did get out in public and do things, was in religious festivals. So yeah, they might have been in the audience. Why not?
I have one more question, kind of along the lines of the audience, and I get this from my students when I've done things in class and reading things in translation. You know, a lot of these jokes, like from the frogs, about Aeschylus's style and Euripides' use of language. The joke really it depends on the audience having a vast knowledge of that kind of thing. And my students ask me, like, would the people in the audience have known Aeschylus and Euripides that well that a very singular joke like that would work? What do you think about that?
I think the answer is yes, they did. I mean, not everyone in the audience would pick up on everything, but the parodies of each other of Euripides and Aeschylus and the frogs they're very sophisticated. I mean, if you are very well versed in the works of these two playwrights, you would just find it totally hilarious. But then, and there's even one of the choruses in the frogs. The chorus say, "Don't worry that the audience won't get your jokes because they all actually own books." And they're really with it. You know, they're gonna understand all the really subtle stuff. And surely there were people in the audience who would get all the little parodies. But then, you know, maybe not everyone in the audience is super literary and has total recall of all the Euripides plays they've seen. But then there are fart jokes too, you know, and I think it's not that these two things are aimed at two different segments of the audience, because everybody thinks fart jokes are funny. I mean,
that's correct. That's correct. Is it possible to have too much bathroom humor? I would say not. The bathroom humor should just overflow, right? So on page 17.
But
go ahead.
Let me just finish one more point. There's the other thing is that the Aristophanes' parodies of Euripides go way back. I mean, he's taking lines from Alcestis, you know, Euripides, one of his really early plays, and still using them in, you know, near the end of the 5th century. And like in Thesmo, he says, "Euripides, did you write this line? You love to see the daylight. What makes you think that I don't?" You know, or so he's quoting from Telephus, which was years and years ago. He's so the audience, if only the elite literati of the audience would get these jokes, I don't think Aristophanes would have so many of them. I mean, he's really counting on people to laugh at something from Alcestis or Telephus, you know, from decades ago. So anyway, yeah, I think the audience they were pretty well versed in their Euripides.
I'm just checking with you. We're kind of up against time.
We're getting close here to needing to wind down. So we had
I could go on and on, but
that's all right.
That's fine. Yeah.
Nobody who loves their subject ever wants to stop talking about it. But a couple just general questions for you. Hackett is releasing this new set of translations. It's the book is beautifully put together. We got to see an advanced copy. It's got maps and indices and notes and commentary. It's really brilliant, and I love the cover as well. It's so clever. Hackett is famous for these.
Thank you, and shout out to Ian Story, a great scholar of Greek comedy. He did so much supporting material of the introductions and glossary and footnotes. So
fantastic.
Credit to him.
It's kind of it might be considered immodest in other settings, but can you give us the little elevator pitch, Diane? Why should students want to read, students in the general sense, want to read this translation of Aristophanes as opposed to the many other fine translations? So here's your chance really to say, this is why it's the best, or, words to that effect.
Okay. Well, I think with no false modesty, I think it is possibly the best. It's really good. And I think the metrical fidelity is a big thing. If you read these, or even better, see them on the stage, you'll really get more of an idea of what Aristophanes is all about, because these sustained passages that are in this really kind of rollicking verse, I mean, it just doesn't work in prose. And but at the same time, not only are they metrical, but they're also in sort of contemporary American English, so
Mhm.
they're meant to be accessible, and they're really meant to be funny,
Mhm.
So I think there are, I was talking about our play reading of Lysistrata at the Society for Classical Studies, the people were laughing and laughing. So I think
Right.
that proves that they really are funny.
Now, were
And
they all
also,
sober? I just have to ask.
it was in the evening, but I don't think people drink at academic
No, I don't.
conferences.
Oh, that would never happen. No.
It was the brilliance of the cast and of the songwriters. And so, as I was going to say about the Oracle, when we came to that, Jerry Fogel was one of the songwriters, and she had them chanting it, and it was very funny.
So the next question is, what are you working on next? Because I'm sure the listeners would like to know about that. Do you have another project already in the works?
Yes, I'm going back to Euripides, and the next play, my next project is Bacchae, one of the really great plays by Euripides.
Right.
It has some, and now I think I'll appreciate it more because it does have some engagement with Aristophanes. So I think I'll appreciate it more now that I've worked on Aristophanes.
Excellent. My final question for you, Jeff, you may have some others, is whenever we have an accomplished scholar, translator like yourself on the program, we often ask them this question: what advice or admonition would you give to young scholars who are studying Greek and Latin? They're toiling through the trenches of the fifth declension or something like that, and they may have aspirations similar to the kinds of things you've accomplished. So what kind of advice or encouragement would you give to them?
Well, I think the reward of reading poetry is experiencing it as poetry. So it's often, I've been in many Greek and Latin classes where they say, like, we're not going to do the meter. We're gonna just translate it, and it's a justifiable decision because you're trying to read a whole play in Greek or something, and there's only so much you can do. But when you can hear the music of the language, that's just beautiful, And even if I know many AP Latin high school student has learned dactylic hexameter, but maybe learned it in kind of a mathematical way, but if you can just really get to hear the flow of dactylic hexameter or iambic meters or whatever it is, it's good to experience ancient poetry as an experience, as sound and rhythm. If it's a play, it's great to experience it as theater. You may not always have that chance, but live theater has so much power. It's so I guess I would, when you're reading text, think about what they really are. Even if you're reading the dialogues of Plato, really imagine the drama of those dialogues, which, is there. It's really like something like Protagoras. It's just a fantastic little mini drama.
Yes.
So
and
yeah.
Plato tried his hand at tragedy, supposedly. I don't know if he wrote any comedy, but that's the legend with Plato. Jeff, did you have any final questions for Diane?
I think that's a great capper question. Okay. And other than just say thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This was really fun.
So interesting. I love talking about and hearing about approaches to translation, and I think our audience will too.
I think so too. Maybe next time we'll have you on to speak some conversational Latin together. Wouldn't that be exciting?
I'm a little rusty, and I haven't been to Latin camp for a while, but But yeah, I think, just as you're saying about Plato, he knew the power of poetry.
Yes.
So, and that's what it's all about. That's why it's worth studying Greek for all those years, so you can get to the point of really experiencing it as poetry.
Well, thank you so much, Diane, for being with us, and we'll say goodbye now.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps it up, Jeff.
Yes, it does.
I guess we ought to get out of here for no particular reason.
No, there's nobody banging on the door.
Nobody banging on the door.
We're just-
no
we-
bad puns.
Nope.
No something or this or that poet society. We
No.
just need to leave.
We do. We're just two cranky middle-aged men that just need
Okay.
to move on.
Curmudgeons, as it were.
Yes, right.
But before we move on,
Yep.
Jeff, you need to tell the audience about your Greek and Latin programs.
No, that's. I'm going to ask you to tell
that's
the
me.
audience about your program. So would you do that, please?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'll be brief.
Okay.
You want to study Greek? Of course you do. Go to mossmethod.com. Check out my program. 4 modules. Take you from...
Neophyte to erudite.
Nicely done.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be better programs out there in terms of the quality of pedagogy. It would be immodest to claim otherwise, but not a better value. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening recently to some sales expert, and he said, you have to tell the audience what is in it for them. What's your value proposition? How is your product going to improve their lives?
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to think about that, and here's what I came up with.
Okay.
You may have studied Greek before. You may not have learned very much. You may be very discouraged and think Greek can't be learned. It's too difficult. I quit.
Yes.
If you take my program, you will not have that experience. You will come out the other end with tremendous confidence and knowledge. I guarantee it.
Fantastic.
If you're not satisfied, you get no money back.
Wow. Is that right?
That's right.
Right, yeah.
You can take that to the bank or not.
So mossmethod.com.
That's right.
Yeah, and how about if they want to learn Latin?
They should go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI, Lingua Latina per se illustrata, the Hans Orberg famous text Familia Romana that I translate as Latin teaches itself. Mm-hmm. This is a brilliant book with a great storyline, and the Latinity in it is outstanding. So if you were thinking, I really admire someone like Diane, works hard all her life, becomes a great scholar, publishes translations of Aristophanes, I'd like to do that. I say you should go for it, and here's how you can start. Take one of my language courses.
Exactly.
It's a good value. So latinperdiem.com/LLPSI or /shop and check out one of these programs.
Fantastic. And Dave, as always, we got some people to thank.
Yes, we do.
Big thanks to Mishka, our wonderful engineer.
Who recently returned from gallivanting around Greece.
Yes, very jealous.
She had a good time.
Excellent.
She wore one of our Quinocent Docent t-shirts.
Excellent.
At a... where was she? It was on the island of Aegina in front of one of the temples.
Fantastic.
Yep.
That's great.
Looked very stylish.
Good deal.
So thank you for doing that. And the gentlemen that provide the music, the intro, the outro, the bumper, Mr. Ken Tamplin.
And Scott Van Zen.
That's right.
So
Singers,
thankful to these
musicians.
Yep.
Really, I think, sets a nice tone of lightheartedness for what we're doing in the midst of all the eggheadery.
Exactly. And Dave, if they want to get in touch with us,
They should email you, Jeff, with corregenda and other kinds of complaints.
Yes.
Jeff at adnauseum.com. Don't forget that there is a V in nauseum because that's how the Romans spelled it. Mm-hmm. And if they want to contact me,
it's Dave at adnauseum.com. Again, don't forget that V. Now, what about this giveaway that we're doing?
Oh,
here?
right.
Yeah.
Yes. So check out our social media handles. Go to facebook.com/adnauseum or instagram.com/adnauseum or x.com, which used to be Twitter, ad nauseum. And if you sign up, I'm not sure exactly what the details will be yet. Mishka will sort that out. But put your name in and pass along this episode so that you can go into the drawing for one of these free volumes of Diane's new translation.
Great.
You will not regret it. Jeff, if they want to get a T-shirt, they want to get a mug or a hat, what should they do?
They should go to adnauseum.com, check out our Lurch with Merch section. And yes, prepare yourself a great gift to yourself for the fall. The black and orange Quinocent Docent T-shirt will look great to usher you into the autumn season.
To show the people that you're taking in the classics.
Yeah, and keeping them down.
Yep. So, Jeff, next week, I think we're going to go on in 162 to finish up the Carl Richard chapter on democracy.
That's
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think this brings us finally to the gustatory parting shot, which is yours this week.
This comes from the famous Mark Twain, who once wrote or said, "The secret to success in life is eating whatever you want and letting the food fight it out on the inside."
All right. Thanks for listening.